Thank you. So I'm Bill Duggan from the ANA. I don't want to assume you guys know who we are. So ANA is the Association of National Advertisers. We are the industry nonprofit advertising and marketing trade association. Our constituents are the client-side marketers. So I'm going to pick up on the game show theme. Does anybody know where ANA was founded in 1910? Give it a shot. Anybody here? New York. It's a tough audience. Detroit, way back when. I think the automakers. So our sister trade associations, which you guys are probably more familiar with, are the IAB and the 4As. So I'm here to talk to you primarily about some work that we've been doing over the past few months regarding ad fraud. And breaking news, perhaps not for you guys, 25 to 50% of the money spent on digital advertising is wasted, and we've all seen these headlines over the past year. Digiday has written about them. It's been in Ad Age, it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in the New York Times. So it's not just people in the business seeing these headlines, but the CMOs and C-suite leadership of ANA member companies are seeing them as well. So who does ad fraud hurt? Well, it hurts everybody here, right? It hurts the advertiser, it hurts agencies, it hurts the publishers. But how about, let's just look at today, November 18th, 2014. Who does ad fraud hurt the most? I could say to the publishers, well, today, it doesn't really hurt you guys the most because it increases your impressions, and perhaps you're being paid more money today because of ad fraud. Agencies, does it hurt you guys the most today? You know, probably not. You know, agencies have been downsized. ANA member companies have been squeezing on fees, of course. Agencies are pretty busy. So does it hurt you guys the most today? Probably not. So, you know, obviously I would submit that it hurts the advertiser the most today because the advertisers are spending the media dollars. Clearly, it hurts everybody in the long term. But I also believe that we all live in an incredibly short-term business environment. So today, in short term, it hurts the advertisers the most. Curious, who's heard of white ops in the room? So as I look out, you know, maybe 20%. So ANA was introduced to this company called White Ops 6 or 8 months ago by a mutual friend. And that friend said to ANA, hey, there's this company called White Ops that we work with from time to time. I think you should know about them. Said the White Ops, ANA represents the advertisers. Maybe there's something that you guys can do together. So White Ops is a company whose origin is in bank fraud. They have since expanded their business model and are working in advertising fraud. To make a long story short, you know, we had an introduction to White Ops. The co-founder and CEO is a gentleman named Michael Tiffany. You know, he helped give us the quick education on fraud. And we agreed to do a test together where ANA would recruit a bunch of our members. Those members would tag the digital advertising that they were doing with a White Ops tag. That tag would identify the percentage of fraud and the sources of fraud for those respective advertisers. The objectives of the study, which I've pretty much said, determine level of bot fraud occurring across digital advertising of leading national advertisers. And then real importantly, because we just don't want to identify a problem because we know that there's a problem, but provide actionable data which advertisers can use to assess and reduce, that word eliminate is probably strong, bot fraud in future. So we were successful. Oh, and here's a great quote from Michael Tiffany. He calls bot fraud the world's most sophisticated cyber crime. So we were successful in recruiting 36 ANA members to be part of this test. 3 from auto, 6 from beer spirits, 5 from financial insurance, 10 CPG, 1 hospitality, 2 fast food, a couple technology, 4 pharma, and 2 retail. We will be, when we release the results of this study, we will name the participants. 35 of the 36 gave us that approval to name who they are. So I should say, when I accepted this invitation maybe 2.5 months ago, the timing for the study was August. We would measure the fraud. September, kind of crunch the numbers. October, release the results. Well, the study window expanded. It expanded into September. So the study included August and September. The numbers are still being crunched. So what I'm going to share with you are some very high-level results, hopefully enough not to get me into trouble. But so some are a little bit broad, but that's really what I can share at this point. Okay, so the key findings, and a lot of this is likely to be obvious to the folks here in the room because you're here in this room, but might be less obvious to ANA member companies. Video fraud is higher than display fraud, actually by about 2 times. And again, when we release the results of this study, we will equate percentages with display and with video fraud. But video fraud is 2 times higher than display fraud, really driven by the fact that that video is more premium priced inventory. The bad guys follow the money, so there's more money to be made in video fraud versus this display fraud. This one of the previous panels from this morning already talked about it. Programmatic is higher than non-programmatic. I think that factor is about 50%, a 50% difference between programmatic fraud and non-programmatic. Again, mentioned earlier today. Fraud is higher between midnight and 8 a.m. for some funny reason. Higher at night. And source traffic also has higher levels of fraud. So some of the broad action steps as a result. Well, one of the key action steps for us is really education. Education to our members. One of my favorite lines lately is "You don't know what you don't know." Again, ANA represents over 600 member companies. Some of the most sophisticated advertisers in the world. Some in this room here, but we also represent many medium-sized and smaller companies. So part of the reason that we got involved in this initiative was just to shine a light on this and to say to our members, hey, this is your problem to help solve, to help find the solution. So, one of the recommendations, advertise during waking hours. Bot percentage varies by time. At night, bot fraud represents a much higher proportion of the traffic. Advertisers can minimize bots by running advertising during waking hours in each time zone. Source traffic. So source traffic fraud was also at a factor of about 50% higher. Build language in the RFPs and insertion orders that require publishers to identify all third-party sources of traffic. Further, advertisers should have the option of rejecting source traffic and running their advertising only via direct from publishers. And if that's at a higher CPM, that's what it is. Here was an interesting insight about older browsers. A high percentage of impressions come from IE6 and IE7 browsers. A high percentage of those impressions are bot traffic. So an action step could be ask publishers if they are still active on those respective browsers. If they are, consider excluding those impressions from your buys. And then our outside legal counsel is a law firm called Reed Smith. They have written some suggested language for contracts. This is just a quick snapshot. So include terms and conditions language on non-human traffic. in your respective contracts with agencies and publishers. I'll read this one. Media company will establish, implement, and use all commercially reasonable technology and methodologies to prevent fraud, detect fraud should it occur, and promptly take steps to prevent continuation and recurrence. You know, and then advertisers should consider incentivizing their agencies to minimize fraud. Agency incentive compensation is a popular topic among our members, and a suggestion could be provide a performance incentive bonus to your media agency for fraud management. Give them an incentive to minimize the fraud. So I mentioned our sister associations, 4As and IAB. Once a year for the past 2 years, we've held a joint board meeting. The ANA board meets 3 times a year. And one of those board meetings, the past couple years in May, has been a joint board meeting with the 4As and the ANA. And what we do in those joint board meetings is try to identify issues, you know, common issues that we should attack as an industry. And one of the common issues that came out of this past May's board meeting, you know, had to do with the great hope of digital advertising, you know, how that great hope is potentially being damaged with fraud, piracy, et cetera. There's been this incredible influx of spending that's gone into digital, but the fear is that if we keep having issues like fraud, issues with viewability, that money could stop. So ANA, 4As, and IAB have gotten together. You may have seen this headline in the trade press maybe a month ago. 4As and ANA join IAB in launching cross-industry compliance organization to combat ad fraud, malware, and piracy. And the subhead reads, new collaborative initiative to build a trustworthy supply chain, encouraging marketers and media buyers to further invest in interactive marketing. So again, just announced, just getting off the ground. We do love our acronyms in this industry, so the group is called the Trustworthy Accountability Group, TAG. A woman, Linda Woolley, who was formerly the president of the Direct Marketing Association, is the head of this group. That was just announced a few weeks back. And there's really 4 core initiatives that I'll take you through very quickly. Eliminate fraud, identify bot-generated, non-human traffic, and remove it from the supply chain. Set up principles, operational and technical in nature, that help guide sellers of inventory in the identification and filtering of fraud activity. So I will say that the ANA Wide Ops initiative with fraud preceded this group, but it is complementary. Combat malware, decrease the proliferation of malware to create a safer, more enjoyable experience for consumers. Fight internet piracy, prevent advertising revenue from flowing to criminals who steal copyrighted material and place it on pirate sites. IAB and many of its members have already made strides through this imperative through the quality assurance guidelines. Some of you in the room may be familiar. And finally, promote brand safety through greater transparency. That seems to be one of the words of the year, transparency. Build openness, understanding, and trust. Sellers must continue to grow the transparency provisions contained within the quality assurance guidelines. A quote from Randall Rothenberg, who is the president and CEO of the IAB, criminal activity threatens to erode trust in the digital ecosystem. Quality, original content is not sufficiently protected against the threats of fraud, malware, and IP piracy, and it is time that publishers, marketers, and agencies stand together to combat these forces as a unified entity. So more to come on this initiative. Again, it's just been formally announced. And then just 2 takeaways from this session is first, the industry must reestablish trust in the digital supply chain. It's in all of our collective best interest to do that. And then really for ANA members, and I mentioned this earlier, advertisers must play an active role, more so than ever. I was on the agency side for 15 years before joining A&A, and I can't tell you how many times I hear in A&A meetings, that's why I hire my agency takes care of that for me. No doubt about it, agencies can be and are often incredible partners to advertisers, but it's time that the advertisers play a more active role in fraud and other issues related to the digital supply chain. So thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions if there's time. I also know that there's a panel coming up.
We are actually going to have you joined by Ricardo.